Hey there everybody, and welcome to a little something new. I've been really hyped over everything surrounding E3 recently, so I decided, hey, why not make myself a list? And I guess I just did that myself. This is my top 10 list of everything that really made me hyped during E3. So I guess you could say it's just my top 10 best games shown at E3. Now, one thing I wanted to make mention of, this is my opinion. This is an opinionated list. Everything that you see here is my thought process. It's what I am personally excited for, so if you do not agree with this list, please tell me down in the comments right now. No, tell me. I appreciate every little piece of criticism. Please tell me what you love about E3. Tell me what you got excited for. So, let's get started. Now, to make sure everybody gets a fair shake, I decided to set some ground rules for what I decided to put on this list. First rule, no CG trailers. I know the CG trailers are a big part of E3, but I'm not the kind of person who simply gets excited when I see a game announced and absolutely none of the actual game is shown. I like there to be some substance to what I'm seeing, not just computer-generated cutscenes that have absolutely no bearing on what the game will be. So, I'm sorry Kojima, I love you with all my heart, you magnificent bastard, but Death Stranding, it's not on this list. Number 2, no games that are going to be coming out in the next few months or are re-releases of older games. Now, I set this rule mainly because I know that people are excited for games like Monster Hunter Generations and Skyrim, but I want to reserve slots for some of the new and unique games that really pique my interest, and not games that people are already going to buy or are going to be re-released. So, the rules are set in place. Let's get started. So, let's kick this list off with the first thing that caught my eye, We Happy Few. Developed by Compulsion Games, We Happy Few is a game set in the fictional island town of Wellington Wells in the year 1964. Although most of the gameplay shown at E3 was in fact very scripted, it did give a decent depiction of the game's art style and what the gameplay would be. According to developer interviews, the game will be a procedurally generated roguelike game, and for those of you who don't know what that means, it means that every new game will feature a completely different map layout with the single goal of escaping Wellington Wells. So think Binding of Isaac, but instead of crying into poop for pennies, you're guzzling happy pills being chased by freaks in masks. Yeah, actually, you know, now that I think about it, it isn't really all that different from Binding of Isaac. Huh. Anyway, the main thing that interested me was the game's concept, taking a pill to make the world around you seem much more fantastical than it really is. Much like The Matrix, the idea of living a blissful lie versus confronting the harsh reality.
That life is not but an empty void. In the grand scope of the universe, we are but specks of sand upon an endless beach, struggling for relevance among thousands and thousands of other grains of sand. The impending meaninglessness crashing upon us like the waves of a great ocean, washing away all we hope to accomplish.
It's refreshing to see a game play with the idea of illusion versus reality, and how the player has to make a conscious effort to walk a tightrope between reality and conformity. I can't wait to see what Compulsion Games comes up with in this new psychological roguelike survival horror mashup. So the next item on this shitty list is a little bit iffy, but screw it. It's my list and I'll do what I want. Number 9 is Resident Evil 7, Biohazard, the first Resident Evil game to use both the English and Japanese titles at the same time. Even though there was a full playable demo released and shown off at E3, it's already been stated by Capcom that the demo most people played was actually a unique piece of content and that it's not in the game proper. Despite this, it was also stated that the demo was an accurate representation of what the final product will be. The game itself is in first person, which is a stark departure from the traditional third-person perspective of Resident Evil. It's great to see Resident Evil trying something new after this fucking disaster. Over the span of the show, we got to see a beautifully destroyed and rundown house, creating a very tense and unsettling atmosphere. Well-crafted set pieces litter the home, adding to the overall frightening aesthetic with small things such as picking up pot lids to reveal cockroaches and the use of videotapes to give the player a view of the past without taking them out of the environment. This unique iteration of Resident Evil appears to be going for a slower-paced and less action-oriented style, whereas more recent titles have opted for a more action-oriented approach to horror. And, with the addition of full PlayStation VR support, anybody wearing those goggles is sure to be in for a hell of a time. It's nice to see Resident Evil going back to its horror-inspired roots, taking a page out of Kojima's fantastic PT demo. It seems as though Capcom are really going out of their way to hide the story from the general public as well, in an attempt to keep the story as much of a surprise as possible. I'm really looking forward to this entry in the series. Here's hoping. Fingers crossed. Hey kids, you ever want to be Jackie Chan? Well, now you can. Number 8 on the list is Absolver, a game that I didn't really expect to love as much as I did. It's not often that a game comes along that is so mechanically in-depth that you can literally create your own fighting style. Absolver is an action role-playing game that rips the fighting moves you've seen in your favorite kung fu movies and lets you mix and match them like a goddamn deck of Yu-Gi-Oh cards. Now, I will admit, I am a bit overly excited for this game in particular, but really, who hasn't wanted to be the star of their own kung fu movie? As the player, you're given 4 unique stances to choose from during combat, each with its own pros and cons. Now, to work around those pros and cons, you're given a plethora of moves you can combine into any way, shape, or form you want, with the ability to quick switch between each stance, essentially making you a fucking kung fu god. Add a pile of sharp swords and a Dark Souls inspired world to the mix, and you've got a recipe that really gets me harder than Jackie Chan's skull. You can tell that the developers were highly inspired by games like God Hand and the aforementioned Dark Souls when developing the gameplay of Absolver, and all in all, it's great to see Devolver once again backing a solid project. I can't wait to see what they find next. So, number 7 on the list is Dishonored II, and to be perfectly honest, when I first saw the reveal trailer at last year's E3, I wasn't all that excited for it. The first game was pretty solid, with a strong emphasis on the use of unique powers to spice up exploration, stealth, and overall combat, but as much as I liked that concept, the game was held back by its lackluster story, its underdeveloped characters, and, well, its emphasis on powers being primarily lethal. With the exception of Blink and Time Stop, the game felt entirely centered on lethal approaches to both stealth and combat. Dishonored 2, on the other hand, has opted to change not only its approach to gameplay, but its entire structure of its upgrade system, for magic specifically. Abilities no longer progress linearly. Instead, the developers have opted to create upgrade trees for each ability, further strengthening the non-lethal playstyle. The 2 main characters are no longer silent protagonists. Each now has a voice, and, as stated by Arcane Studios themselves, each will react differently depending on how violent the player decides to be during combat. They even began using an entirely new engine, named the Void Engine, to provide a better variety of locations to explore, character models to interact with, and weather effects to experience depending on the location. Games in the stealth genre feel few and far between as of late, so I can't wait to actually play something that finally panders to the murderous kleptomaniac inside me. Well, at least until Skyrim Remastered comes out. From the minds that brought you Banjo-Kazooie. No, not that one. Comes the most inspiring action platformer of the last generation. No, not that one. Look, I'm talking about Yooka-Laylee, alright? Jesus. So, for those of you who've been living under a rock for the past few months, Yooka-Laylee is a game by a group of ex-Rare employees who disagreed with the direction Microsoft was taking their company. With the unbridled support of the fans behind them, Playtonic Games was born. Now, Playtonic Games brings back classic composers Grant Kirkhope and David Wise, known for their work on Banjo-Kazooie and Donkey Kong Country for overall music and sound design. As for the gameplay, Yooka-Laylee boasts a return to form for the 3D platformer. The game centers around Yooka and Laylee, a chameleon bat combo paying homage to Banjo-Kazooie and other 3D platformers of the late 90s with its vibrant aesthetic, colorful characters, and overall gameplay-centered environments. Ever since its initial announcement, I've been excited for another action platformer in the vein of the old Rare titles. During the game's explosive debut on Kickstarter, I couldn't help but invest a healthy chunk of my then very small budget into something that was both a return to form for the 3D platformer and a nostalgic trip down memory lane for me. I can honestly say I have never been more hyped for a 3D platformer. Let's just hope it's not another Mighty Number 9. From the men and women who brought you this, and this, and this are bringing you fucking this! Yes, that's right. Number 5 on the list is Scalebound, a platinum title I honestly wasn't sure I was going to get at first. Now, for those of you who aren't aware, I love platinum games. These guys know just how to make a game interesting and unique while having stories that don't necessarily have to take themselves too seriously. When Platinum announced that they were making Scalebound, I was hyped as hell for the game. The graphics were stunning, the gameplay looked deep, and everything involving the dragon really got me pumped. Developer interviews hinted at a ton of different gameplay features such as in-depth dragon customization, expansive overworld, deep action-centered gameplay, epically huge bosses, and you know, riding fucking dragons. How could I not be hyped for this? Seriously. Now, unfortunately for me, it was slated to be an Xbox One exclusive, the one console that I don't own. So could you imagine my surprise when Microsoft announced that all the Xbox One exclusive games were going to be released for the PC? My hype levels were off the charts. It was like I discovered the game for the first time again, and getting a chance to see the first boss really got my blood pumping. Overall, the gameplay shown off at E3 was amazing to see. Platinum has yet to disappoint me, and I have a feeling they ain't going to be starting now. I can't wait to see more of Scalebound early next year. Final. Coming at the end of a series. So, number 4 on the list is Final Fantasy XV, a game that really needs no introduction, but fuck you, I'm gonna do it anyway. Final Fantasy XV is an upcoming action role-playing game Square Enix has been developing for around 10 years. Yeah, you heard that right. Final Fantasy XV has been developed for roughly 10 years now. Initially beginning development as Final Fantasy Versus 13, it's part of the Nova Crystallis subseries of Final Fantasy, which includes 13, 13-2, Lightning Returns, Type 0, and now Final Fantasy XV. Now, one of the biggest complaints was that the lock-on system and the counterintuitive combat made for incredibly clunky gameplay back when the demo was first released. The lock-on system really didn't feel fully functional, and the combat just kind of felt wonky and gimmicky overall. Originally, it was designed so that the player had to set up this sort of weapon order so that certain attacks would come out at certain times depending on the weapon chosen. Now, you're able to switch between weapons on the fly, allowing for a much more fluid combat experience as well as a more tactical approach to specific enemies. Visually, this game is stunning. I have never seen a game look so beautiful, and I mean, just look at it. You are looking at its visuals right now. I literally thought that this was a still frame of like a picture or something. Jeez. I mean, come on. Who could possibly forget the first time they saw that Ramuh summon? Like, really? Now, in the trailer at this year's E3, we got to see quite a few other Final Fantasy summons, such as Titan and Leviathan, and hey, that's not the only stunning thing we got to see, eh? Square sure has blessed us with another great looking Final Fantasy, but we all said that about 13 back in the day, and you know, that does make me a little hesitant. So, that begs the question. Will it be the next coming of the RPG gods, or will it be another confusing, nonsensical story with terrible gameplay and a literal hallway for exploration? I guess only time will tell, but as of right now, I have very high hopes for this show-stealing ARPG. Oh boy, we sure are getting to the top now, eh, gentlemen? Number 3 on this list is the heavily Dark Souls-inspired world of Nioh, a game by Team Ninja, the creators of games like Ninja Gaiden and... Wait, guys, what the fuck is this? Oh god, guys, literally, no, what the fuck, man? Look, I asked you for Dead or Alive footage. What do you mean this is the footage? Dude, no, this isn't Dead or Alive. Wait, what? What the fuck is Dead or Alive Extreme? Look, are we sure this isn't porn? Alright then, fuck it, just leave it in. Yes, you heard me right. Team Ninja, the pioneers of the boob jiggle and the booty bounce, are straying a little bit away from the usual jiggle physics-centered style with this unique spin on the action RPG. And by unique, I mean Dark Souls in olden day Japan, but hey, you know what? Let's be honest, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Now, Dark Souls is known for its punishing gameplay and visually interesting level design, and as much as I love Dark Souls, after 3 games of the same aesthetic, I've kinda gotten numb to it. Look, I'm just trying to say that I'm really happy Team Ninja took a page out of From Software's book when creating their new environments, while at the same time taking their own unique spin on it. It feels refreshing to get a different take on a world with demons and monsters from a more Japanese-centered world, rather than the Western-inspired world that Dark Souls provided us. The combat in Nioh feels like an improvement to the Dark Souls' methodical and slow approach to exploration. Instead of having each weapon have their own unique moveset that the player has to learn, Nioh instead opts to have a more centralized system of combat, attributing combos to weapon types and having each weapon have its own set of stances. Each stance has its own advantages and disadvantages, attributing to a deep combat system that can be played multiple different ways while still feeling fresh for players that want to, advance deeper into the demon-centered world Team Ninja design. All in all, this game looks absolutely stunning. I can't wait to cut down some demons whenever this releases.
Open your eyes. Wake up, Link.
Alright, we're almost there, ladies and gentlemen. Number 2 on the list is the much anticipated Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Now, Breath of the Wild is a stark departure from every other Zelda game to date. Naming all the differences would take an hour, so instead of doing that, let's just list all the things I found most interesting from all the gameplay featured at E3. First of all, the new art style looks fantastic, blending together the cartoonish, cel-shaded style of Wind Waker with the gritty, realistic look of Twilight Princess to provide the player with a banquet of color in every unique environment. You can jump and climb now, allotting to a ton of new ways to explore the world, providing a surprising degree of depth to all these new locations. There's also a new crafting system that provides a deep and expansive approach to the way the players engage enemies and combat overall. Environmental effects such as fire creating updrafts and weather causing lightning strikes, among other things, make the world feel more alive than ever before. Weapons now have a degree of durability and can break, creating tense situations and making the way a player approaches combat a much more strategic endeavor. There's also a new emphasis on technology, providing the player with a new perspective of the world and further increasing the ways that they can interact with it. Not to mention snowboarding, gliding, and a host of other new exciting gameplay features that Nintendo's been playing around with. All in all, it's difficult not being excited for a new Zelda game, but it's even more exciting to see Nintendo innovating in a much more positive direction with their old franchises. I can't wait to explore every part of Hyrule whenever this releases.
Yoyoda. お前の構成が始まる。ようこそ私のベルベットルームへ。
Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. The game I was most hyped for at E3 was, in fact, Harry Potter Assembles a Harem, the video game. Also known as Persona 5 for you guys who don't know. Persona 5 has been a game in the front of my mind since its announcement trailer back in September of 2014? My excitement was through the roof. Initially, I had no idea that Persona 5 was going to even be at E3. In fact, most of my friends who love the Persona series almost as much as I do didn't even know. It was almost as if it was hidden at E3, not wanting the general public to know of its existence until it could make its move and steal our hearts. Now, the first of many major points I wanted to talk about was the new dungeon layouts in the game. From the 15-minute gameplay trailer Atlas showed us, it's clear that their approach to dungeon layouts has far more effort put into it than any of the previous Persona games. Dungeons are now way more elaborately designed with unique elements for exploration in each one. In previous games, the dungeons felt incredibly static and boring, and there was no real unique elements outside of the initial dungeon concept. Like, Yukiko's dungeon didn't really feel all that different from even the final dungeon. They all felt the same. Now, if you saw the first floor, you basically saw the whole dungeon too, so there wasn't even this element of uniqueness within the dungeons themselves. But now, you are scaling castle walls, jumping out of airlocks, going through paintings, and overall just exploring your own unique heist areas. It's wonderful. Atlas is really putting their all into the new Shadow World exploration. This, along with the inclusion of classic demon designs for shadows as opposed to those simplified kind of black blobs that you'd really see, are just phenomenally game-changing. It makes every dungeon feel unique. It makes every enemy feel completely different. And the fact that you can talk to them now adds so much more to the game. You know what, let's just dive right into the combat, shall we? Now, the combat has shifted a bit as well, emphasizing a more strategic approach to battles, and the new baton touch ability implemented in Persona 5 looks so interesting. In previous games, if players struck an enemy's weakness, they were allowed one more attack to keep on attacking the enemy, allowing you to kind of string together enemies' weaknesses to eventually kind of go for an all-out attack, a very strong attack on all enemies that were downed. This time around, however, those all-out attacks actually have their own unique dynamics as well. It's not just a strong attack that you end up doing hoping to clear the enemy out. It's actually now way more dynamic. You hold them up. You hold shadows up so that you can get stuff like money, items, or even adding them to the player's persona count, similar to the demon recruitment system that SMT has. Now, another interesting concept that Atlus actually showed off was the new approach to social links. They're calling them cooperations now, which I actually like as a name. Let me just be 100% honest. Now, what Atlus is doing is turning what we know about social links on its head. Instead of the static visual novel-esque approach to interaction, a more dynamic system has actually been implemented. Thanks to what they showed off in the trailer, a lot of people are actually theorizing that the way time passes now is actually vastly different from the way it was displayed in previous games as well. Instead of simply triggering events and hanging out with friends and, just having time pass naturally, you actually have a sort of ticking clock that limits your amount of time to explore Tokyo. If this is true, you'll actually have to think about the way you spend your day and plan out the most efficient route to actually maximize your relationships. Or, we can just hang out in the batting cages, because who really gives a fuck? I can't wait for this game to be released in English. It's honestly safe to say that Persona 5 really stole my heart this E3. Hey there everybody, thanks for sticking with me through this ramble-fest of a list. It's been a blast putting it together, even if it did take me 3 weeks of work to finally finish. If you like this video, why don't you give it a like? And if you like my smooth and sultry voice, why don't you consider subscribing to the channel? I usually like to make Let's Plays in my spare time, so I'm sure you'll have a decent variety of content to choose from. Anyway, I've talked enough for this video. See you next time, everybody.